In his own words, a lot of the things that our next guest learned about working in a team came from his love of basketball growing up. So much to the point that he even majored in Human Kinetics in university, hoping to make it somewhere in the sports world. Little did he know he would end up pursuing UX design at retail companies such as Clearly, as well as Kit and Ace.
And when you say product design, it's also very confusing, because when you say product in Clearly content, most likely they think you're talking about eyeglasses, and at Kit and Ace they think you're talking about clothing. So we almost become like a second thing, not like the first thing that people can think of.
These days, you can find Billy on the starting five of Later's UX design team as a lead, which frankly makes a lot of sense given that he was the first official UX designer at the company. Off the court, he operates more like a coach and has mentored over 30 different designers from all around the world. And mind you, a lot of this happened within the past couple of months. I can genuinely say that Billy has played a fundamental part in my career as a designer, and of course, my love for sneakers. So it's my honor to announce this season's MVP of the MVP, Billy So.
I was born in Hong Kong, and as you know, there's a political uncertainty in the 90s, so my parents decided that it's a good move to immigrate to Canada. So I believe we got here in 96. I was at grade 6, so I don't really remember much when I was in Hong Kong, just, typical busy school life, didn't do much. And then when I got here, really changed because, language barrier first, and I always like to hang out with folks, so I have a huge motivation to be good in terms of like just learn English. So that's that. And I went to private school because I think that's kind of how my parents see, like, hey, if I lock this kid with a bunch of local, he's forced to speak English, and I think that really helps me. And it wasn't that eventful when I'm in high school. I just the kid that kind of in the middle of the pack, not the coolest, but also not the nerdiest. So I don't get picked on. I'm just like in the background. So I have friends, and mostly we just play basketball. That's about it. And the other thing is to focus getting into university, growing up with Asian parents. That's the only goal. Basketball and music, pretty much that's my childhood. I'm old, so the other way I learn English now, I remember, is to listen to a lot of rap. So, which is really, really strange, but it really helped me to understand, able to converse, not like speaking like a textbook. So, yeah.
I feel similar in a way because I also learned a lot of my English through rap music. I listened to rap throughout my middle school days and stuff like that. I wanted to touch a little bit on the basketball stuff because I know basketball and sneakers are the reasons why I think we get along really well. So kind of what was the role of basketball in your life growing up?
Yeah. In high school, what got me into basketball is just highlights, right? So I grew up watching Iverson, Jordan, and then later on Kobe. So I just want to be like them, right? I don't want to sound cliche, but literally that's how it got me want to play. And then when I start playing, it's kind of helped me to understand a couple of things. Like, one is work ethics, because I wasn't good when I started. So I want to be like, hey, I want to beat this guy. And I'm very lucky I'm able to play with a lot of older players. So they're all bigger, stronger, faster, and more skilled than me. So that gave me I don't want to get my ass kicked every single time when I play. So that teach me hey, if you want to get better, you gotta put time and work into it. And that's, I start workout, and in the summer I go to SFU. They used to have an open gym, or at least I just kind of sneak in and just shoot hoops, and just to get better. So that really helped me in terms of work ethics. And also you get to hang out with friends. You develop a lot of friendship, and the people I play basketball with in high school, I still talk to them, I still hang out with them. So that's that. And later on, basketball teach me about just, I guess, when you start to get old, you can't really play. You look on the other side in terms of more the coaching side of things, how do you get people to see or like play as a team? And it's really challenging, right? And communication is key. As we know, we see a lot of super teams. Sometimes it doesn't work the first year because they don't want to sacrifice, right? They want to be, hey, I do me, and we're good. And in reality, it doesn't work that way. And so it really like helped me in terms of work, just to we can have a bunch of talented people in the same team, but it doesn't mean anything unless people can see the vision, understand how to work with each other. I think that's kind of what really like basketball actually helped me in terms of like a good pastime for mine is entertainment, but also like just life in general teach me a lot.
And I guess in terms of where basketball would eventually lead you to, I'm kind of curious if you ended up going to university with Human Kinetics because of basketball. Was that like the case?
Yes, it's a very, very, very simple decision. Like I like sport, and I actually got accepted both SFU and UBC at the time. And my parents think UBC is better because it's University of British Columbia, and they accepted me as in the Human Kinetics. So that's pretty much the decision.
What kind of career path would you have led if you were to pursue it like all the way through?
There's three essentially. You can either be a physio, doctor, or PE teacher. None of them appealing to me. So my parents asked me, then what the hell you want to do? Well, good question. I'll figure it out. And yeah, and that's that.
Did you have better determination of what you wanted to do closer to the end of university? Or like, how was your university experience overall?
I don't really have a good sense in terms of what I want to do when I'm done. Partially just me, right? I'm just immature at that time. Like I don't really think that far ahead. But also, there's no co-op for Human Kinetics, which is weird. But if you decided to do physio, you kind of have co-op in a sense where you have to do volunteer hours as part of your admission process. And I actually did volunteer maybe like 20 hours, and I just know that's not for me. Like I don't have the patience and care to do that. Like it's just not me. So and then I know that option is out. And doctor, I'm just not smart enough, because what usually a couple of my friends is like they finish human kinetic degrees, and that is the prerequisite of going to med school, right? And I'm not even close being that level. So that option is out. And then, like I said, I don't want to be a teacher. So I figure, okay, I'm going to finish this, but maybe explore sport conditioning, because that's kind of aligned with, my interest in basketball, how to help people get better and faster. But once you start doing more research, there's just no market in Vancouver, because it's not like we're in the States, right? You have like many divisions of college, and you can work there and kind of work your way up eventually to work in a professional sport team. And in Vancouver, you can count it in one hand, right? BC Lion, Vancouver Canucks. Well, Grizzlies no longer exist, so that's pretty much it.
If you were to look at the careers that we have accessible to us right now, there's a lot more of a bridge between tech and fitness as well. So I think it would have been probably a lot more different if you were to graduate like right now. Back at UBC, there was one where they had like a smart technology for basketball players to wear. And so I think that would have been maybe something you probably would have explored if you knew that you wanted to do design and fitness at the same time.
Oh, definitely. I think they're another option, right? And then I always kind of like tech anyway. So I think, yeah, that could be. And also, more recently, just because of the COVID situation, the whole work from home, people stuck at home and they want to stay in shape. And that's another big, opportunity where, you can see, Peloton and whatever, right? And people just want to get in shape and stay home. So that'll be a big part too.
So I want to kind of backtrack a little bit. So you graduated university around it's 2005, right?
Yes, 2004, 2005, I can't remember.
And then you ended up going into kind of like just traditional retail for a couple of years, right? Yes. What was that experience like for you?
I had a good time. I shout out to the right shoe. I was there, and it's Fourth and Fur. It's kind of like a perfect combination at that time that I can actually utilize my education and my passion because they help people with lower extremity problem. So people need to wear orthotics, and we specialize fitting them footwear to accommodate that. So I'm able to apply all the stuff that I want. And it's good because I think retail, however way you look at, I think it's a really good skill set for anybody to build communication. How do you handle conflict? How do you handle where you're right, but you can't tell your customer in the face like you're wrong? But how do you handle that, right? How do you navigate through it? And then that couple of years really helped me out. And I think that also helped me become a better communicator when I work as a designer in a team. So,
okay. And I guess like at some point during that part of your career, you decided that you wanted to go back to university. What was kind of like the motivation going back? Because I know you went back to SFU in 2009, yes, and you studied under their interaction program.
Yes, it's called School of Interactive Arts and Technology.
And I guess what motivated you to go back to school?
Yeah, just do better. I was promoted to become a store manager after like 2 years. It was great, but you look on the flip side is then what? I'm not able, it's not like I ever going to be a store owner. That's your ceiling. And at that age, I'm like, oh, is that it? Like, is that all I can do? So it took me a while to figure it out because I know if I'm going back to school this time, it's for real, right? You're making a shift. You're like dropping everything and just pivot. A lot of my friends think I'm crazy. Like, hey, you're making decent money. Like, why would you want to go back to school, right? And then my reasoning is, well, I'm not going back to school because I want to go back to school. I want to go back to school to change my career. And I think to answer your question is, I have a lot of interaction with sales, like inside sales rep, so B2B sales. And they, represent the brand, right? It's like New Balance, Nike, whatever. And they'll come in every quarter, show you like, okay, these are the collection of the shoe. And then they kind of go over the tech spec. And then you just kind of like, okay, I recommend you buy this. And then you kind of like look at your inventory, you look at, who your target customer, then you buy for next season. And I figure, hey, I can do that because I kind of have the technical experience. I have the degree sort of like understand biomechanics, and also, hey, you get to travel and do not have to be B2C and B2B. That sounds great. So that kind of moved me like I need to go back to school to do something like that. But when I started exploring, I actually did a couple certificate at BCIT first because it's been a while before I get back to university. I just want to make sure my brain still rotate properly. And I did well because I think it just motivated. I'm just motivated at that time. And then I do a little more research. So if I spend 2 years, I can get a certificate at BCIT, or I spend the same amount of time and get a degree. Obviously, I'm gonna go for a degree because it sounds better. It doesn't mean you're smarter, but it just sounds better. So that's why I go back to SFU.
And I guess in that experience as well, do you feel like you graduated and then kind of had kind of a better understanding of where you wanted to be in life?
I want to say yes, but no, because it's a bet, right? I'm just betting on myself. There's no guarantee. So when I go back to school, I just, hey, that's what I want to do. And I'm going to put some time. I'm going to work hard to see what I can get, right? Like, and I think that's kind of going back to basketball. Just because you put time in, it doesn't mean you're going to be the best. You're going to be better, but you don't know what the outcome is, right? And if you only work hard knowing you will succeed, I don't think that's the point.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And then I think for you, making that switch definitely made the world of a difference, because in 2011, you actually land your first job as a UX designer.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. UX designer at I'm forgetting the name, but they were recently acquired by Nokia.
Yeah, Alcatel-Lucent. So they are just like a giant company that built network.
Got it. Okay. And leading up to that first job experience, what do you remember about like the time getting like your portfolio ready and resume stuff? Was it like a long grind for you before you eventually got that job?
I wish I can remember, but definitely I put a lot of work in it. I just, being a designer with not a lot of experience, you just kind of constantly stress out, is this good enough? Mm-hmm. Is that what people want to see? So I just look at what other people have done. And you can say steal, but you can say borrow idea, whatever you call it. But hey, at that time, you don't know, right? So I, get my portfolio ready, and I went through a co-op program. So that helped a little bit, because when you go through a co-op, the expectation is a little bit different. And I'm just very lucky, to able to get that, because that is my break. Like that is, something that allow me to do or get a glimpse what UX is, and then, hey, do I actually want to do it? And then B, I got a really good manager. She's great. Like her name is Frances. Just good guidance. Like, it is a very, very enterprisey company, right? It's like a massive company, and just able to navigate working with people. I don't know anything, right? Like that's not my background. I have no experience working in like a corporate office job. So she's able to help me to navigate through it. Yeah, so that's that.
And I guess in hindsight, now that you've had obviously like a long career, do you think getting the first job is always the hardest part of starting a career in design?
I would say so, because if I start mentoring recently, and all I'm hearing is junior designer doesn't get a chance because they have no experience. So if you get that ball rolling, that is no longer like stopping you, right? And then I think like money, right? When you make your first million, the second, third just become a lot easier. I think it's the same thing. Yeah.
I guess going back to your career, because now in terms of going to a second career, you actually stayed there for about 2 years before actually moving into another company. You moved to Clearly,
Yes.
which was, I guess, I know them more for their glasses and like their brick and mortar stores, but I wasn't really sure that they had like a big emphasis on their digital space. So when you moved there, I guess what was the number one? What was the motivation behind moving to that company? And I guess what was the experience like building for an e-commerce brand like that?
Yeah. I was very lucky to get that job. Like in hindsight, I don't know how I got it, because I definitely do not have the experience that they after. But I applied there because I just finished my contract. Like, so after I finished co-op, I finished school, and then I got a couple months. So I apply for a job. I got a contract for a couple months. And then when that's done, before the contract's up, I have to start looking, right? Because otherwise I'll be jobless. And and then I saw Clearly posting. They actually start out with just e-commerce first. Yeah, the physical store come after. But I don't know much about the company, to be perfectly honest. All I know is like they sell contact lenses and glasses at that point. And I walked in, talked to the hiring manager, Braden. He's actually working with Herschel right now. And he took a chance on me. And after our first interview, he followed me on Twitter. So I'm like, okay, I think I'm in. I can't be sure, but like, why would you follow me if you have no intention, or like if I'm just terrible, right? So I got back and meet with the team, and yeah, very lucky, and then start working there. Since they're digital focused, so they kind of know like the web. They also, again, that was a while back. So at that time, responsive web design is still like a thing, like a brand new term. Mobile web is still a trend, right? And they really have a focus, want to make sure they are good on the mobile space, right?
Yeah, I was gonna ask because I guess when I looked at the responsibilities that you had in that career, and you were there for 2 years as well, it seemed like you were kind of building things from the ground up. How much of their like design practice was actually built out there at the time?
It's different, like, because when you work in an e-commerce company, the goal is a little bit different than work for a SaaS company, right? And we are build a lot of more like process, how to make sure, like, because we do a lot of promo, like weekly, monthly, or whatever, sales campaign, or you call it. So how can we do that? How can we update those campaigns as quickly as possible for the web and the mobile, right? So that's more like trial and error. We were working with Mobilify during that time. And one of my job is to, it sounds funny now, but I have to take the asset for the web and then make it in a way that work for mobile. And Mobilify essentially give us like a little blank div that we can throw whatever in it and it will work. So that's kind of like figuring that out, working with a UI designer to make sure that works. And we did some user journey to really understand the how user buying glasses and contact lenses, because UX is really tiny when I work there. Like I'm like the only guy with another UI designer. There's also like a web person, and we kind of know what UX is, but it wasn't the focus, right? And the focus in e-commerce is sales, sales. So we kind of like just learn and navigate and try to, do what we can. But yeah.
The way that I'm thinking about it is that you had your first job and then you moved into your second job, and it seemed like the amount of responsibilities almost kind of doubled in a way, because I would have imagined you probably moved from a bigger design team to a smaller one, and you kind of had to establish those practices on your own through your experience. So what was it like going into that experience and feeling like you had to kind of build up new processes from the ground up?
I guess I'm too naive to worry at that point, because I just think everything is possible at that time. So that never crossed my mind that would be a challenge. I just know like if I suggest something, the worst outcome is like, no, we can't. Okay, well, here's what we can do. And that's basically my approach for anything, right? You can't just get whatever you ask. So you always have to come up like, okay, if you can't do, what's the next best thing you can do? And e-commerce, Clee contacts, I think even like at Kid and Ace too, it just different, right? When they look at the web or digital component. And when you say product design, it's also very confusing, because when you say product in Clee content, most likely they think you talk about eyeglasses, and at Kid and Ace, they think you talk about clothing. So we almost become like a second thing, not like the first thing that people can think of. So.
And then, yeah, so to your point, you move into Kid and Ace after, and you were there also for another like almost 2 years.
Yeah.
So kind of like spending a good amount of time in like that e-commerce and retail space. What do you think about designing for those products in specific that is different from what you do right now? Like, what are the biggest challenges when it comes to working for companies like those?
That's a good question. There's a lot of different challenges, but I think when I was working at Kid and Ace, a new challenge that I come across is handling assets, right? So we have a phenomenal photography team, great photo, like editorial style, beautiful. And they want to make sure that is uphold the highest standard when we push it out to the public. So we're pushing out 6 MB photo on a mobile web, which not going to happen, right? And I understand where they're coming from. I'm like, I get it, but imagine you're on the phone. If you wait like 30 seconds to load something, what is the likely outcome you think our customer will do? They're just gonna close the tab. So it sounds simple, but it's just going back to the basic. And okay, I understand why you want to do it, and here's what I suggest. 6 MB is definitely out of the question, but here's what we can do to help you load better, right? So you can do some sort of like smart loading, right? So if on the web we can load the highest, still not 6 MB, but definitely we can preserve more quality. But when it comes to the mobile web, that's just not a reality, right? And probably crop differently depending on the orientation of your phone and all the fun stuff. So it's just a lot of those negotiation. And then they also have to learn, right? Because their job is to take good photo. And my job is to make sure your stuff can be seen by a customer. So I'm not like against you. I'm not trying to ruin your day, but you got to help me out too, right? So sometimes I got to crop a certain thing. So just letting them know I'm going to do this, I'm going to let them see it. So just develop that trust, develop that working relationship. So.
Yeah, and I guess I was also curious about how much of your work is actually tied to the success of, let's say, for example, would you measure the impact of UX on the amount of sales that you get? Is that something that often happened in those roles?
Good question. I don't like to say like, I don't know, it's just personal thing. I just don't like to tie myself into whatever success. I just feel like if I do my job, and if you can do your job, if we execute things properly, things should work out. And if it work. Like I don't really care how much I have contribute per se. But for e-commerce, that kind of, it's just so much factor, right? So merchandiser, they are the one making sure the catalog is, label everything correctly. And then you have like I mentioned, photographer, make sure you demo the product in the most beautiful way, and you have stylists. So what I have done is just a tiny fraction. What I can say, if to answer your questions, like, I don't know, maybe 5%, I guess, because, I help to make sure the site load better. We want to make sure people can find the product more easily. We trying to solve the problem, like, at that point in time is, hey, if you want to buy something online and allow people to pick up in store, right? So it looks simple on the paper, but like there's a bunch of logistics we have to figure it out. Like, what if the store doesn't have it? And what if there's a store that have it, but it's like a couple kilometers away? Like, is there a way we can like do those things? It's more behind the scene, not necessarily like front facing, because at Kinetics there's a brand team. So the brand team kind of take care of the aesthetic of the web. And they're good at what they're doing, right? And so I guess 5%. I don't know.
And I guess to that point as well, one thing that I find interesting about the challenges about working in those kind of spaces is that typically there's a lot of returns, right? Like, people always buy things and then they always return things. And I think one of the innovations that's coming out right now in the e-commerce space is that people are able to actually try on things, whether it's in VR, whether or not it's in like AR. So there's just all these new technologies there. Between the two companies, I'm just curious from your perspective, what were the different challenges that they were facing at the time?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. Some I cannot say. I can tell you right now. But I think for, let's say, clearly contact, it's about the prescription. That's always a challenge, because legally, you need a doctor prescription to buy glasses. So if you buy online, we need you to submit your prescription online. So that's already a big friction point. So how to make that easier, right? So whether we allow you to submit it digitally, or you can talk to our customer service. So like, it's not even the website, it's just like the fact that can you buy? If you don't have a prescription, obviously you can't, but so we're gonna tell you to get one. Or we have people just fake it, like because it expire. So they just photocopy, and we just like, well, we try our best to verify it, but at the end of the day, they can do whatever they want from the customer perspective. So the challenge is to get that like legal side of thing to make it, work or make it smoother. And what you just said, the try on glasses is tricky. So we have like a virtual try on at that point, and the phone back then is not as powerful, so you can't just use your iPhone. Like now it's just so easy, right? Like you can almost do like a filter, but back then that technology is not ready yet. Yeah.
Okay. And what did it look like at the time? Was it kind of just like a picture and then it kind of just rendered something on top of you, or?
Yeah, you take a selfie and you upload it, and then we throw a frame, and that's that. Or we might have a live version when you have a webcam. We trying to like match. I can't remember.
Yeah, I've been on the Ray-Ban website right now, and they have that. And sometimes I go into the store as well, and I kind of just compare between what I saw, and it's always different. But it definitely is a working challenge, but it'll get there eventually, I feel.
Yeah, and then, sometimes it looks good, but glass is actually a measurement, right? Like I can't remember the term, but like the bridge and whatever, like there's 3 number, like the 2 digits. A lot of people don't understand that. So if you wear glasses, just look at inside of like this part, I think, I can't remember what it's called, but there's like 3 2-digit code. That's your measurement. And then you can use that when you go online. You make sure at least the glasses will fit. Make sure it's fit you first before you look for style. Yeah.
Okay. So I don't want to dabble too much in the e-commerce space, but those are like some really interesting design challenges and circumstances that you had to work through. So you're done with the retail space, and correct me if I'm wrong. So you're the actual first UX hire for the later team.
Yes.
Okay.
Product team, but yes. Yeah.
Okay. So this was 2014 still?
Yeah, 4.5 years ago. So whatever time is. Yes.
What do you remember about, well, first of all, learning about Later and who they are, but like, what do you remember about just going into that experience of like talking to the team at the time?
I have no idea what Later is at that time. I'm not like, I use Instagram and stuff, but I'm not like a social media person. So actually funny at that time because they later use a recruitment partner, right? So Blank Slate. I think we still use them maybe even like a year or two ago. I don't know if we still work with them. But anyways, they call us like, hey, later is looking for a designer. I'm wondering if you're interested. I'm like, I guess. Like, I don't know who you guys are, so I have to look it up. And also at that time, I want to change. Like, I don't want to do e-commerce anymore because I've done it for 4 years. So I think it's just a good time to make a switch. So I think it just kind of like worked out like, hey, there's someone interested, want to see if it's a good fit. And also if I want to change. So that's why I have a strong motivation to have that conversation. And I don't remember exactly what happened, but Roger is very involved at that time, obviously, because at that point in time, we only like 20 people. So yeah, I talked to Roger, and just some of the hiring process is exactly the same, right? So I had my phone interview, and then second I talked with Roger in person, and then I got the design exercise, and I presented, and I remember when I presented, it's only Roger and Cindy. And yeah, that's that.
And based on your experience in the past, do you think that ultimately set you up to operate the UX side alone as you went into the company, or was there still a lot of like setting up that needed to be done between everybody?
It's very different. Roger took a chance on me, like no doubt about it. I still remember the conversation before I got the offer. We went to a coffee shop, and you know, like I think that's one of the reasons why I like working here, or you know, it product team work for me, is that I'm a pretty like just to speak my mind and just say what you gotta say. And Roger like, hey, you know, you never work in product design before. You never work in SaaS. That's my concern. But we still want to hire you. So do you think you're up for it? I'm like, yeah, like that's a challenge. That's all I need, right? And that's why I like that. And it's a fair assessment, right? Like I haven't done it. But a lot of stuff, I think is transferable. So honestly, it was like a blur first year because I was the first, I guess, outside of Roger, the first hire on the product team. Right now, we have PO, we have researcher, we have writer, and designer. So I was all that in the beginning, right? And I never done PO before, but after a couple of months in, like, I gotta do this. Whatever you need to get done, you gotta get done, right? You gotta make sure things are done and things are follow up, and you know, it's a good learning experience. So yeah, it's just a completely new skill set that I have to learn as I'm, you know, doing my job.
And one thing that you mentioned as well is that there was this kind of conversation about risk. And obviously Roger and the team were taking a risk at the time because you didn't have any like SaaS background. But you were also taking on a risk, I would imagine, as well, with like a company that was much smaller than the other companies that you worked for before. So in that kind of consideration, what ultimately motivated you to accept that offer?
I think just an opportunity to work for a SaaS company. Money is never a main motivator for me. Like I just want to make sure I'm able to work for a company that share the value that I have, do cool stuff, right? And I think working in this space, it is cool, right? And just helping small, medium business, and it is a good thing to do. And yeah, it's pretty simple, really. It's not that complicated.
Okay. And I guess, you know, in terms of things that we can safely say on the podcast, were there any kind of like stories like over the past couple of years that you remember? Because I've only been at Later for 2 years, which is actually like just around half the time that you were there. But at the same time, the company has grown significantly within the past 2 years. So in like the design realm, what would you say are like some of the stories from that moment?
Well, I mean, like you said, we grow, right? Like, you know, you spend only 2 years, but you see already the hiring that we have done in 2 years. So imagine I see the entire process, and it's a learning in terms of how to work with each other. It's almost going back to basketball, right? Like, okay, you have a very talented player you want to sign in off season. Hey, look great on paper, and you do your thing, you do the math, you make the salary work, and you finally got it. And then you realize like, oh my God, that's things that I'm not anticipating. And I think a lot of people in the design world are very opinionated, and they always think they're right, and they should be, right, because they spend the time. So the idea, or well, the process of working with the design team was challenging in the beginning, but I think now we're at a place, we set up the system where I think, I don't want to use the word OG, but like Cindy, like myself, we just kind of adapt as we see more people, right? And then you just also have to understand everyone work differently, and they bring different idea on the table, which is what you want. And because you have a different idea coming at you, your idea is probably a version of all these combined, right? Or may not be even like one of them. So I think just being more open to understand, like negotiating and seeing things like, hey, that may not be what you want, but like, okay, that's fine, but is this the best solution, right? So I think that is not like a story, but I think to summarize all the stuff that happened in the beginning and then now, like there's a lot of change, right? And I think it's changing in the right direction.
Okay. And in your time there, you would eventually go on to become almost like a pseudo UX manager. I know at the time we used the word UX lead, but I think ultimately when I joined the team, you were technically our manager. And I know most recently as well, you stepped down from that role to kind of still contribute to the UX team at a high level, but more in a contributor kind of sense. I guess when we're talking about the difference between being a manager and an individual contributor, do you feel like you were better suited to be a contributor ultimately? And is that why you decided to step down?
Yeah, I think I'm like a hybrid. So I know I'm just giving more issue for Roger to worry about when he's still my manager, because I kind of know I don't want to be a manager right off the bat, because there's a lot of responsibility. And actually, I would recommend people read the book, The Making of a Manager by Julie Zhao. And it's a great book. Oh, okay. I didn't know you have it, but in the back. But yeah, I would strongly recommend, not even, so I think it's great for people who have aspiration to become a manager, or just like want to see like what it's like, because I think a lot of people think like, oh, if I want to grow in my career like a designer, the next step is a manager. That's not true. Like, and then, I am very comfortable, like I just know what I'm good at and things I don't want to do. And that's another thing, as you start working in this, and it's always good to try things, because the advantage is you understand what you don't want to do. And I know managing team is not something I want to do on my list. So I make it very clear, like, okay, we need to hire a manager. And because also knowing we're growing, right? I don't have the skill set and experience, because I've never done it, to grow and scale a team that able to handle what later is trying to do in the next few years. So it's just a combination thing, like myself and where the company's going. And it's just being realistic. So
Yeah, and that's an interesting conversation as well, because the idea of not being able to lead a team, even though you've had like years and years of experience, I guess when you're setting up the expectations for somebody to become a manager in any sense, there kind of has to be a shift in like the responsibilities. And would you say that with the roles that you had before, would you just say that you never had the chance to actually lead in a managerial way to learn those skills needed?
maybe, but it's just not what I want to do. It just never come across like manager. Yes, that's what I want to do. No, I still want to design. I like helping people out, but that's only a tiny part of being a manager, right? And team is doing a fantastic job, like laying a career path. How can we hire so they support the people on the in the team right now and in the future hire. So like I don't think like that, right? So I think that's what being a manager is, to understand all these kind of things. So I mean, I to your point, I kind of done it just by default, right? Like, okay, you're the first hire and you're not fired or you haven't left, and then as you grow, yeah, this guy know the most, and that's kind of what, like, I would say people think I'm a manager, but not really. Like, I'm just kind of by default to kind of be in that role, right? And I'm okay, because I'm a big fan of just getting stuff done, and then I'm fine with the idea, like before, like the first the second UX designer is Carmen. The team is so small. Like we don't really need a manager per se, but like now we're at like 8. Okay, we need to have some sort of system, right? So I think we reach a size that we actually need whatever role that we need to hire.
And I just want to say, like, at the time, Carmen was also an intern, so it was almost like kind of the relationships that we have right now on our team, where we have like more of the junior designers and the ones who have been there for a while, and then kind of being able to have that mentorship kind of relationship. So I think at the time, I can resonate with what you're saying about not necessarily needing the title of a manager, but ultimately having to kind of just serve different responsibilities as they come.
Yeah. And that's kind of nature of startup, right? Like you can have all the title you want, but in reality, the title really never capture what you actually do, and that's okay. To some people, no, I need to have that title, and that's fine too, right? That's not right or wrong. It just depends what you want, and yeah.
For a designer who's contributed at like a contributor level and wants to ultimately get into a managerial position, not necessarily becoming like a product manager, but let's just say moving into like a senior level, or even kind of um, like a design manager that's not directly at the top. What do you think those individuals can do? Because I think the jump is quite different from just going up in levels of experience.
Yeah. Well, to preface that, we should clarify whether it's internal or agency. Like that's a completely different thing. So we're talking about internal, right? Because that's what we're familiar with. Communication is always important. It's just like a coach, right? So if someone is struggling, can you give them guidance to help them to become better? That's one. Come up with a process, a pipeline that ensure the UX team deliver consistent and high quality deliverables. And just being there, right? Like I know it just sounds so generic, but communication is so important. Like there's so many layer of that, right? Like writing, conversation, like listening, like mentoring. So I don't really have a intelligent answer to it. It sounds very basic, but I think if you're personable, approachable, I think that's also very important, because if I have a problem, but like I'm scared of you, even though you're awesome, I don't think that's gonna work, right? Because I just don't want to talk to you. So it's a lot. It's that's why it's not everyone can do it, right? Just because like you want to do it, that's okay, right? That's your goal. I'm for it. But as you trying to reach that goal and you start doing those whatever things you need to work toward that goal, you might realize, you know what? Some of this I'm just not good, and that's okay, right? Then you can reassess like, is manager still what you want to do? Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean it's fail. It's just one of the many things you can do.
And I've had these conversations with other designers as well who want to kind of get into that position. And I always feel like it's almost like an obstacle to be able to kind of take on these additional responsibilities, especially if you're in a situation where you don't have the luxury of having extra time to work on different things. So that being said, is this something that you kind of just have to suck up and then maybe just spend a little bit more time after work to kind of focus on doing these things? Or is this something that you think could be negotiated?
Yeah, actually, that's a good question. Actually, I got this idea. Well, not the idea, but I know Carmen sometimes help out in hackathon, just to be like a judge or like industry folks that, give some mentorship when they work. I think that would be a good place to start, right? You have no pressure. You're there just to help a team to win. See how you do there, right? Because they're strangers, right? So that kind of tests your communication skill. And I forgot to mention earlier, giving good feedback is extremely important. Be a manager, right? So for example, if you show me something, I'm like, this suck, man, it's not gonna go anywhere. Your feelings hurt, and that's that. But like, hey, this suck. This is how you fix it. Now it's more meaningful. Now you understand, like, hey, you know what? I appreciate the direct feedback, but now I know what I need to do to make it better, right? So I think, yeah, being like a judge, like going to hackathon, help people out, go from there, just see if you like it. And if you like, oh, I don't like it, so then you might want to reassess the situation, because you're not even doing it for work. And you already don't like it. Imagine you're doing the work setting. You can't bail once you're in that, right? Like you're getting paid to do the job. So that's just my suggestion.
Okay. And I think this segues really interestingly into our next topic about you being a mentor. Because I know even though you're not managing our team directly, you're still contributing to the design community in a really meaningful way by mentoring on the ADP list, which is something that you recently started doing, I think within the past year, and you've already mentored over 30 different designers. What is your main motivation for kind of becoming a mentor at this stage?
Two reason. One is just selfish reason, like I said, because giving good feedback is a skill. If it's a skill, that means you need to practice. So this gives me an opportunity to practice, so I can actually give you guys feedback at work. So that's just being selfish. But the other reason is I'm part of this junior designer before, right? Like this group. I have no idea what I'm doing. Like imagine like when I finish my degree, there's no ADP, there's not a lot of resources. There's internet, but still, you just really have to start figuring out. I use Twitter a lot. That kind of helped me out in that case. But now I have a direct platform to talk to people in the industry where people can tell me, hey, this is how you can be like get into the right path. So I think it's a no-brainer for me just to help those people out because I was there and the feeling is not great. Like it sucks when you feel like you're stuck, you don't know what should I do, even though I'm willing to work, right? And that's not a good feeling. So that's kind of like why I want to do that.
Okay. And out of the people that you mentored, how many would you, or like if you were to break down the percentages, how many of them would you say are more on the junior level compared to like the intermediate and senior level?
I would say the majority, like almost 90% are just junior right now. It's more specifically finished from a recent graduate from a boot camp.
Yeah. And I was actually going to ask you about that because I know one of the issues that's come up a lot recently in the design world is that there's not enough junior level roles, and I think the competition to actually get one of those is becoming a lot harder. And it's especially hard between that gap between after you graduate and getting your first job. What do you think is ultimately causing this divide between like graduating and getting your first job?
I think part of it is just geography too, right? Like Vancouver, just like a weird space. We always want designer, but if you don't have 3 years, then you just out. So we have boot camp and just keep pumping out graduate. That's the reality, right? So the gap is that, and also it just not because company actively not looking for junior. I think you have to look at time and resource. So imagine us, right? Like we're so busy. And when you hire a junior, regardless of their skill level, you still have to spend time. The question, does the company have the time to do it? I can guarantee like 9 or 10 will say no. And I think that's a major hurdle of like, they just don't want to hire junior design because they just don't want to invest in them.
Yeah, and I wonder if those individuals as well want to be in those managerial positions, right?
Yeah, tough to say, right? Tough to say. I think, what I have been telling the junior designer on ADP is it's like a chicken and egg problem, right? So you keep applying and all you're hearing, you don't have enough experience. So you're not going to go anywhere if you just pout. So my recommendation is like, okay, go volunteer for a charity organization because they never have money to hire a fancy agency to do the work. So you go there, do the work. So A, you get real work experience with not a student project on your portfolio. So that's a win. Second, now you're able to see what working is like, right? I think there's a big difference working in a student project versus in a real work project. And that's something like, if on the hiring side, I would prefer people who at least have some sort of working experience or just purely, it's all a student project. So.
And to that point as well, I think a lot of people feel like if they do work for free, it's almost kind of like not a bad omen, but it leaves a bad taste in your mouth, especially with everybody saying that, oh, you shouldn't be doing work for free. There's even, I don't know if you know this, but there's even this weird saying that if you go into a design interview and they make you do take home work, like it's like a straight no. And I'm just like, I'm not sure where that mentality kind of comes in. And I know for me, it wasn't there when I started, but I'm just wondering if that line of thinking is also contributing to this idea where people don't want to do things for free.
I don't think it's like a black and white thing. It's based on the situation, and also I think a better way to frame this: you just don't want to be taken advantage of, right? Don't take it so literally. Like you're not the Joker, right? Just because you're good at something, you should never do it for free. Like no, don't do that. Like if the company, like we ask people to do take home exercise, but we are not asking them to do later related work. So yeah, I'm not paying you, but we're not getting anything out of it. So I think that in that context is fine. But I know some company that they want to make sure you can work with team. It's like, hey, I want to work with this team for a day, so we just kind of know if we have that good vibe. Yeah, then they will pay you for that day. So I think that's fair. So you really have to look at like in context, like what they asking you, what kind of work they asking you to do, right? So hear people out before you give out an answer, essentially.
Yeah, and there's a difference between the whiteboard exercise, which is the traditional way that I've learned about the design interview process, and the take-home exercise, which I think is an interesting spin on that. And there's two sides to it. I think number one, the whiteboard exercise kind of shows the interviewee that you can kind of think on the spot and do all of these kind of things. But the beauty of the take-home exercise, I feel as well, is that you have that extra time to think. I know that we usually give like a certain time frame, and people don't always adhere to the time frame, but it's also not a bad thing to kind of take that extra time to think, I think. And I think the way that I'm thinking about these take-home exercises is that it's actually an opportunity to show off more than it is to show off when you're in like a whiteboard exercise.
Yeah. I mean, we don't do whiteboard. I remember what Roger said is we don't do whiteboard because interview is already a nervous experience or stressful. We're not trying to add another layer to it because our objective is not to actively make you feel like shit all the time. So, I mean, whiteboarding, to your point, right? It's great for certain things. But if you think about it, we never whiteboard anything and ship it the next day. So why are we doing that way? So why don't we do a take home that actually have more reflective in terms of how we actually work, right? So it worked for us. So,
and with that in mind, I also think what it allows us to do is also ask deeper questions when it comes to like critiquing their work. And it's interesting because I guess when that happens, you talk less about the basics of what it actually means to be a designer, but more what it means to be a designer within a team environment when you have to consider things like the developers, the product owners and stuff like that. And I think that's a lot more of a positive and like growing mindset to have.
And then, that's a good point because that's how later work. Right. And then, when people ask me on ADP, like, oh, how should I prepare for an interview? Well, you really have to do some research on the company and just get a glimpse of how they might do certain things, approach certain project. Because what I can say is just from, later, right? It's one company amount, 1,000. So, but there's common thing. It's just like, we want to see how you think. If you can defend your design decision, if you got asked a very tough question, how would you handle it? It's not like, oh, you answered this the best answer, so no. We want to see like, hey, maybe you don't know the answer. Do you have the, I guess, gut to let people know? You know what? I actually didn't think of that, right? And that's okay, and that's real work. I rather to see the real you, so that I know what I'm getting at when you start working, as opposed to you put up, I don't know, a facade, and then when you start working, this is not the person that I'm anticipating, right? So I don't know. That's just kind of my opinion.
And I wanted to close off this episode of the podcast by asking you two more questions. Number one, when it comes to like doing your portfolio and putting on projects up there, because I know you've reviewed a lot of portfolios in your time, and one question that comes up usually that I have with other junior designers is that they're kind of wondering whether or not it's okay to redo projects. What are your thoughts on that?
Depending on the goal, right? So I don't like redesign. When I'm redesigning Apple Music, in my mind, like, okay, you're talking about like a multi-billion company. I'm pretty sure they figured that stuff out. So you're almost implying like you know more than them. I know you that's not your intention. Like I get why you want to do it. But when you say redo, maybe like, hey, I didn't do this in the first time for whatever reason. Like either I ran out of time or like I just don't have the maybe the skill set to handle it, right? Or you just left it. So now I have what I need. This is how I would do better. And then maybe like compare before and after, right? So that show me understanding that you have the understanding that you're not designed based on what you think. You're really looking at like either some sort of research or data. So that is way more meaningful than just, oh, I'm gonna redesign something. Like that just my pet peeves.
Right. So it's almost like you could take, let's say, a school project that you did years ago, and then now that you have a couple more experiences, you can kind of do this hybrid between having a new project and also kind of reflecting on what you did in the past and where you could have actually improved. Because I know a lot of projects, they have like this area at the end where it says, this is what I would have done better if I had more time. Now that you have more time, you can actually do that and show the people interviewing you and the people reviewing your portfolio like, hey, you've actually grown in this direction.
Another good analogy I would say is redo assignment is like remaking classic movies. Look at how many remake we got is awesome. Not likely. So if you want to remake and make it good, it has to be a strong reason why. If you approach it that angle, and if you can validate like, hey, I have a really good reason to really redo this, then go for it, right? It's never like absolute answer when it comes to this kind of stuff. You have to look at it in context. And funny you mentioned about the last section, how might we do it with more time? Answer it actually you have a reason to. Don't answer it because you have to. Like, and I can tell, right? And I think I told you many times, and I talk to the mentees, like, do not make universally true statement. That drive me nuts. They're like, oh, what do you mean? Sky is blue. Now what? Yeah, you're right, but it doesn't mean anything. So it's just one of those things, right? And I tell the mentees that I don't know you as a person when I just look at the portfolio, right? And I kind of jumping into the hiring, but we have so many applicants sometimes. Maximum time we can spend maybe like 5-8 minutes top. So what I really need to know is who you are, what you do, and then I just need a sample of what you have done. If it looks good, okay, we want to talk to you. That's it, right? Don't write me essay. Don't do animation, like flying things all around, because I literally just recently have a mentee session where words are like spinning in as I scroll down, and I actually have to like, my apology, I have to stop because I'm getting a headache right now. You just don't do this. Yeah.
Yeah. I sometimes prefer if people just did their portfolios on Notion, because I've seen ones that are like really well done and you have to like worry just less about like the formatting and stuff like that. And I get it. Like, people might feel like, oh, this is a cheat, but honestly, like it's so readable. Like Notion has just done such a good job at making like the web notebook just like accessible and just readable for everyone. So my advice personally from me would be to, just don't even consider the personal website. Just put everything on Notion, because it's just like, that's unless your goal with the personal website is to practice and have a project. But other than that, if you're just showcasing work, just do Notion, in my opinion.
The nature of what portfolio should be changed, right? Like when I start the discussion, designers should be able to code. I'm pretty sure that discussion no longer valid. Like people don't care if you can code or not. Like it's fine because we have technology that you don't have to code anymore, right? So things change. So those are like just tools. I think people get so hung up on like, oh, do I have to do? Well, who cares, right? Like different company use different application. That is not the point. The point is, how do you think? What is the design process? How do you, justify your design decision? That's what it matters. So whatever things you use, as long as I can see that, I'm good. That's it. So if you look at that angle, that's why you shouldn't do crazy animation, because now you're just distracting me. I can't even read this, right? You're just taking those things away, so it's not doing yourself any good.
Perfect. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time. This has honestly been like probably the most insightful episode that I've done, just because we're able to kind of get into all the nooks and cracks of this situation. And I'm really just glad that we were able to have this conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's fun talking about design all the time.
Yeah. What would you say you're looking forward to the most this year?
Just growth, right? Like the UX team, I think, has matured or at least evolved to a point now. We have this kind of like mentorship relationship, right? So how would that look like? And I'm also very interested to see, where design is going to go in general, because all the AR stuff is like, is always happening, but it's just never able to seems go anywhere. And obviously metaverse just become a thing. So I'm more like a sit and wait kind of guy. Okay, well, Facebook is trying it again. We'll see if it works. So that would be interesting. And we see some big companies start jumping into it, right? So Brooklyn Net now do like the Netaverse.
I saw that, yeah, the live games.
Yeah, and then you see trolls saying like, oh, so this is a lower graphic 2K. So, I mean, they're trying things out. But I think it's cool that, okay, you give this platform and you have companies who have enough resources to try, and we might get something good and we might get something bad. But at least this may be the push that AR need to get somewhere. So.
And then maybe we can finally try on those glasses for real.
Yeah, maybe.
That's awesome. All right, thanks, Billy.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Hey, this is Joey, and thanks for listening in to this week's episode of the Minimum Viable Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, give us a follow. We have new ones coming out every week that I think you'll enjoy just as much. And in the meantime, share it around with your network. Leave a comment or send me questions at Joey Limmena. I'd be more than happy to talk about this episode and any future ones we have planned out.